Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Children of Roswell, a 7-decade legacy of fear, intimidation, and cover-ups, by Thomas J. Carey and Donald R. Schmitt, narrated by Barry Abrams. Forward. If you thought you knew everything there is to know about Roswell, think again. Roswell investigator authors Donald Schmitt and Thomas Carey have meticulously peeled back a fresh new layer from that hauntingly mysterious UFO and extraterrestrial ET event of nearly 70 years ago. This is a book with stories told straight from the hearts and as seen through the eyes of children whose families and lifetimes have been shaped in unbelievably chilling ways so hard to imagine. Even though many of their parents who were there during or soon after this historic incident have now passed on, their children say they can never forget what they know and what they and their families had to do to survive it. Now they share the truth about what it was like to live behind closed doors in fear of government pressure because of what they knew, the unsolved mysteries, the strange disappearance of the son of a key witness, a new clue about the mystery nurse reportedly involved in the aborted alien autopsy at the Roswell Base Hospital. Other untold stories, and the gut-wrenching impact their families endured for decades that is still alive within them to this day. As you read this special collection of emotional, heartfelt stories, you will learn how this historical incident, in some cases, tragically affected the children and families involved in this 7-decade documentation of fear, intimidation, and cover-ups. This book definitely delivers a powerful message through the personal tragedies sprinkled with lighter moments as stories are recanted about typical teenagers reacting to the spaceship crash story that would forever change the little town of Roswell, New Mexico. You'll learn why the children of Roswell feel compelled now to speak out about the lingering aftermath from what happened there nearly 70 years ago, and why they feel it is critical the rest of us finally know about it. Although this book is not only about one of the most famous UFO cases of all time, the chronology of events is important in connecting the dots to long-held, tightly guarded secrets as told to Schmitt and Carey in a masterful blend of true-life stories of today and their historical past. These events, which took place within and nearby the town of Roswell in early July of 1947, have become an iconic connection between the topic of extraterrestrials and millions of people worldwide. There are many reasons why this happened, but one stands above the rest. The legitimate media did its job, as well as possible, under the circumstances at the time. How the media reported the story played a key role in shaping how the people involved directly were impacted, as you will see. At noon on July 8, 1947, the intelligence office at the Roswell Army Airfield issued a press release announcing that a crashed saucer had been recovered, and a front-page article appeared in the evening edition of the Roswell Daily Record. The story was picked up by the wires, and articles appeared the next day in many newspapers around the world. It was, of course, a huge, mind-boggling story, and reporters were eagerly on their way to Roswell to cover it, interview witnesses, scrutinize and photograph spaceship crash evidence, and, in other words, do their job. But they never got there. The commander of the 8th Air Force, General Roger Ramey, certainly under orders from President Truman, conducted a press conference in Fort Worth, Texas at 4 p.m. that same day, changing the account to the recovery of a Rawin weather balloon. Reporters turned around, and interviews with the scores of witnesses did not take place. The UFO cover-up had informally begun. Had the President and the Army Air Force not reacted so quickly, news reporters would have arrived in Roswell, witnesses would have been interviewed, and evidence investigated, and the world may well have learned of the extraterrestrial presence among us in 1947. To a journalist, it's always about what happened and why. This book underscores the bigger issue that the UFO ET phenomenon is truly a significant part of a bigger picture of lies, deception, and deceit prevalent in our world today. People brave enough to challenge that are a vital part of the journalist's quest for answers in trying to figure that out. This takes us a big step further in that direction. The Roswell story would emerge when Major Jesse Marcel Sr., the head of intelligence of the most famous unit in the U.S. military in 1947, came forward to researchers in 1978, and the rest is history. A small New Mexico town would become home to the world's most known incident related to the UFO phenomenon. You will learn how and why Jesse Marcel Jr. became such a fighter for the truth, an officer and a gentleman, and why he and his father both courageously came out from the closet of secrecy to challenge the official weather balloon storyline, despite fears of government reprisal. Despite two more explanations from the Air Force accounting for the Roswell incident, the extraterrestrial explanation remains standing on a platform built from interviews with hundreds of first and second-hand witnesses. Perhaps no pair of researchers has conducted more such in-depth interviews than Donald Schmitt and Thomas Carey. Their Witness to Roswell, Unmasking the Government's Biggest Cover-Up, has now been eclipsed in The Children of Roswell, in what legendary newsman Paul Harvey would call the rest of the story. Roswell, of course, is not the only evidence pointing to an extraterrestrial explanation for the UFO phenomenon. Nearly 70 years of citizen science has amassed a mountain of such evidence. That being the case, why is the UFO question still not resolved? The vivid remembrances recounted by these family members may shed more bright light on that dark question. Just when you think it can't get any more compelling, it does. An intriguing interview with NFL football great Tom Brookshire by Thomas Carey reveals a wide range of reactions as a teenager in Roswell in 1947 about what he witnessed and described as one of the strangest things he'd ever seen in his life, as well as his own run-in with a reporter about the flying saucer. Since that memorable 1947 summer, the American media and the United States government have been embraced in an elaborate dance around the most important revelation in all of human history. The media could report the UFO phenomenon, but it was not allowed to challenge the cover-up with imposing questions asked of authority. In The Children of Roswell, you will learn how the families were affected by that deafening silence and media control. That media dance continues to this day, but the music has slowed and the tune is changing, because this story just won't go away. Whatever agreements were reached in the late 1940s and early 1950s among the U.S. government, the television networks, and the big city newspapers, that understanding regarding the UFO issue is eroding. It is only a matter of time before a major news venue challenges the status quo with the right questions asked of the right people, agencies, and services. It is the bravery of people like you will meet here, through their personal testimonies, that will help make that eventually happen. As a broadcast journalist and veteran CNN news anchor with a lifelong curiosity about the UFO issue, I noted with interest how CNN engaged the phenomenon more frequently than any other network or cable news channels. Most of this coverage was aired on CNN's flagship Larry King show. Over 2.5 decades, King occasionally brought researchers and witnesses, including Jesse Marcel Jr., on his program to discuss the UFO question, including the legendary October 1, 1994 show held just outside Area 51 in the Nevada desert. Elsewhere, UFO-related documentaries are now ubiquitous on cable channels and usually get high ratings, as the interest to know what is going on in our universe continues to grow, not decline, through the years. Thousands of articles continue to be written in mainstream print and internet media, with photos and comments showing up more frequently on social media as well. Hollywood continues to draw from a seemingly inexhaustible list of extraterrestrial-related themes. However, the stories presented here are not Hollywood fiction, but truthfully told, intimately revealed, and finally shared by those who have lived to tell how their lives and families were affected then, through the years, and to this day. One day, world governments will likely acknowledge the truth behind the UFO phenomenon due to media pressure, a populist demand, collective evidence, and testimonies of thousands of witnesses, from military pilots, high-level officials, and investigators to innocent bystanders, including the history being recorded here in this book. It would be the biggest news story of all time. The Children of Roswell, a 7-decade legacy of fear, intimidation, and cover-ups, may cause one to wonder, if the Roswell cover-up extended to the next generation, intimidating even the children of witnesses, what other vital information has our government withheld from all of us? It's an eye-opening, insightful must-read for inquiring minds that will tug at your heartstrings. Cheryl Jones, broadcast journalist, former CNN news anchor. Just the facts, ma'am. Sergeant Joe Friday, Detective Division, Los Angeles Police Department. Record enough facts, and the answer will fall to you like a ripe fruit. Franz Boas, American anthropologist. Introduction. Roswell in Perspective: The Human Response to an Extraordinary Event. Eyewitness testimony is in need of reinstitution of relevancy. It has been weakened by revisionists and cynics who establish a double standard for that which is accepted as fact. Facts are facts, and criminals are still being convicted by the sole declarations of very human witnesses. Ufology has always and should always require a much higher scientific standard of acceptance due to the possible extraordinary nature of the phenomenon. Skeptics withstanding, those of us who still profess objectivity should allow witnesses every opportunity to profess the facts as they know them, even when we don't like what they're saying, lest we become nothing more than story gatherers and fall into the same complacency trap as most contemporary journalists find themselves on the subject of UFOs. For these past 25 years, a most concerted effort has been waged to find a resolution to one of the most perplexing and unflappable mysteries of all time, that apparently insurmountable question that has seen all of us grow older without any victory in hand. What actually did fall out of the sky outside of Roswell in 1947? The government has tossed out possible explanations, like platitudes coming from a 5-year-old. Investigators have debated not if, but where, and even still how many, and debunkers continue the damage control, all to no avail. After putting many years into eliminating every alternative explanation, only 2 possible scenarios remain. The Roswell incident perpetuates a grand campaign to cover up some super-secret project gone awry, or it really did happen as all the witnesses contend that it did. It is amusing how many of us subjectively dismiss hundreds of eyewitness accounts and simply insert a random hypothesis, then seek to make all the known facts magically fit the new pair of shoes, the theory of the month, as we like to call them. Such would prefer that someone egregiously fabricated the entire affair to cloak the truth, with the proviso that someday, hopefully in our lifetime, a more open government will release the files and the true nature will come spewing forth. Unfortunately, officialdom keeps fumbling around in the dark and has actually created more suspicion than solution, all in a rather nondescript fashion. Apparently, this has always been for effect and not public awareness. Control of outgoing information is still the primary precept of the government. Often, its own fears and ignorance of the facts are its most motivating emotion. With disclosure not at hand, UFO research, and specifically the 1947 Roswell event, has arrived at a juncture of public consciousness and acceptance as to the true nature of what lies behind the legend, the myth of what started this all. With this pretext, readers are asked to don their best detective caps and re-examine the origins of the plot. Without prejudice or bias, we will ignore every detailed nuance and focus on the human aspect in the entire Roswell syntax. For this introduction, most names have been omitted to focus on earthly tendencies. We have published, endnoted, and referenced the entire embodiment of sources for more than 20 years. Most is on the public record. Reinvestigating the manner of response of those involved will demonstrate the full scope of this now iconic case. We shall attempt to separate the story from what the eyewitnesses state and swear as fact. We will examine Roswell through the eyes of the novice and see where human perspective begins and a jaundiced eye intervenes, where official position is countered by eyewitness position. We shall conduct a pragmatic investigation of the case from start to finish and observe if the human behavior matches expectations of something mundane or truly something extraordinary. And lastly, we will examine the immediate aftermath and whether the actions of the authorities coincide with the behavior of those who have just buried the Roswell saucer. Was it really case closed, as the Air Force continues to dismiss the incident even today? We begin with the hot, lazy summer of post-World War II in 1947. The flying saucers officially arrived the last week of June and became instant celebrities on all news fronts. Mass hysteria was not the issue. Clearly someone else's hardware was invading our airspace. Never to miss an opportunity, advertisers and pranksters jumped on the bandwagon and attempted a number of publicity stunts and isolated hoaxes. All were easily identified, but people anxiously continued to peer at the skies. For the military, this was no laughing matter. With each passing day of failure to identify the intruders, the Pentagon was pressed for answers from both the White House and the general public. Witnesses were both seeing and photographing aircraft that outmaneuvered, outperformed, and outflew anything scrambled after them. A nervous tension started to replace amusement as military officials provided no explanations. Now, in the face of such a situation, how could we expect an average, sophisticated, non-superstitious population to react? For those who have suggested that the entire country was caught up by a haunting reminder of the not-forgotten broadcast of War of the Worlds, history proves otherwise. According to major newspapers at that time, survey choices, which included everything from U.S. military secret devices to foreign spy planes, a mere 2% of those polled actually thought we faced a possible intelligence from off the planet. Hardly the numbers that would support the final conclusions of those who peacefully resided in and around Roswell, New Mexico in July 1947. As a matter of fact, many of the key witnesses directly linked to the event never heard the famous radio broadcast before that time. Nevertheless, not one of them anticipated the life-altering events yet to come. According to the Air Force's Project Blue Book, there were more UFO sightings at that time in New Mexico than anywhere else in the nation. The land of enchantment was clearly the subject of someone's curiosity. Russian spy planes? Top secret atomic testing? Whoever was behind the growing dilemma, New Mexico was tracking unknowns at a growing intensity, and America already had the atomic bomb. We didn't need any more excitement than that, as one officer put it. The vast portion of high desert in the central part of the state is open grazing land. Ranchers were more than casual bystanders for the constant demonstration of military showmanship. So when these civilians reported hearing an explosion amidst thunderclaps the night of July 2nd, the late hour alone was pause for their curiosity. This concern bore fruit the very next dawn. Ranch foreman W. Mac Brazel, routinely rode out to inspect the previous rainfall, and that morning he stumbled upon a scene that would forever change his life. We know that Brazel had no knowledge of all the saucer excitement spreading throughout the country, so he obviously didn't race to that proposition. Did the cowboy conduct himself as he had for all the typical, unexpected debris from the sky of the past? Being a responsible supervisor, he normally would have gathered up this garbage and kept it out of the grazing path of the cattle and sheep. Present-day evidence of this was an overflowing water tank brimming with weather balloons for many years at the main ranch house up until around 1992. Ranchers continued to deposit such refuse in this receptacle for more than 50 years. But Brazel didn't just gather this material and dispose of it as he should have. Later, he would lament the extra effort of having to circle the sheep 2 miles around this pasture, clearly suggesting the extent of the debris. He stated the sheep were afraid of this strange material. What transpired next was also not consistent with the ordinary. The perplexed rancher took samples of the wreckage to his neighbors, asking for help. Next, he went into the nearest town of Corona and placed a call to his boss in Texas, still seeking answers. Pieces from the crash started to circulate around town, including the local pub, which left the patrons just as puzzled as Brazel. Artifacts even stole the show at the annual 4th of July rodeo in Capitan, an hour south of the debris field. From all accounts, no one could cut, burn, or identify this unusual material. That same evening, a frustrated Brazel returned to the debris field to drag a large section of the unknown wreckage to a livestock shed 3 miles away. Such would be all of the activity of civilians and their response to an extraordinary event, and night would come the first day. Word was spreading quickly throughout the surrounding region, and with it souvenir hunters made their way to the scene of all the speculation. This was hardly the behavior of hard-working, no-nonsense, salt-of-the-earth individuals whose handshake was their bond and who disliked being crossed even more. They weren't being fooled about this. They needed to see for themselves. As described by man, woman, and child, the rumors were true, and they grabbed the most exotic pieces, as in some unattended candy store. Take note. Neighbors hid their bounty in caves, in water tanks, under floorboards, in sacks of feed, in fruit cellars, and even inside jars of canned peaches. 2 obvious questions are, who were they hiding this evidence from? And why did they treat it so secretively? Nevertheless, for something so sensitive and important to someone's national security, no authorities, we repeat, no one, was looking for anything. Nothing was reported missing. Such was the continuing civilian response to this extraordinary event. Still, not having a single answer, Brazel attempted one final resolution. After completing his end-of-the-week chores, he headed for Roswell to finally report it to the authorities there. Not even a Lincoln County State Police officer who was supposed to know everything that was going on in his jurisdiction could recognize the wreckage. Up to that point, not a single individual recognized a conventional piece of material. Unfortunately for Brazel, neither the sheriff nor any of his deputies could offer any help. Nonetheless, the sheriff was so impressed with the box of scraps sitting on his desk that he dispatched 2 of his deputies to head north and check out the story. Nevertheless, Brazel was still batting a big 0. What happened next created the very nightmare scenario that officialdom fears most. The press, albeit serendipitously, got wind of the growing mystery. Radio station KGFL talked to the rancher over the phone while he was still at the Chavez County Courthouse. Brazel not only charged that someone was responsible for cleaning up all that wreckage, but next splashed gasoline on an already smoldering fire. They weren't human, he proclaimed. The reporter, in stunned disbelief, still urged the distraught man to contact the Army at the Roswell Army Airfield, RAAF. This sounded like something they would need to know about immediately. Keep in mind that this was the Sunday of a 4th of July weekend. Now imagine that whatever stories some old rancher was selling, not only the head of intelligence of the most elite military unit in the United States, the 509th Atomic Bomb Wing, takes immediate note, and also the very commanding officer of that very base unit gets involved. You can stop imagining. The mystery deepens as the base commander can't identify the debris either, and there is absolutely no report of any downed aircraft, secret tests, or rocket launches. If anything happened around Roswell, they would have been the first notified. And for that matter, the RAAF was always on alert with the bomb and its security. Whatever this material was, and wherever all the rest of it was, it sure got the senior officer's attention. Why else should he dispatch his very head of intelligence, plus the equivalent of foreign intelligence? The latter, in the event it was something manufactured in another country. Why else was the head of CIC, Counterintelligence Corps, sent? And if that wasn't enough concern, with a box of the true wreckage in hand, why did he immediately go up the chain of command and alert his boss in Fort Worth? And if that doesn't suggest the seriousness of the situation, why does his boss immediately contact his boss in Washington? Clearly, these high-ranking military officers found themselves in the same state of disorder as the rancher. Lastly, the Pentagon wanted to see firsthand and quickly ordered some of the material flown east to its attention. The growing interest in the unusual material had now advanced all the way to Washington. Total ignorance remained the prevailing situation. Brazel and the two officers arrived back at the ranch running out of daylight. It was then in the hands of the military. Sunrise found the two officers anxiously perusing the then ransacked arroyo, as wreckage had scattered with the prevailing wind. Brazel just hoped for this to all end and to get back to running the spread. The Army wanted this to be one of ours in the worst way. But there was so much of the crash remains, and it extended for almost a mile. Quickly, they determined that it was a mid-air explosion that caused it to rain the components in a fan-shaped pattern. There was much more than they could load into two vehicles, and just as the samples they had handled back in Roswell, the field was strewn with identical material. They proceeded to gather and contain all that they could while Brazel returned to his duties. Back in Roswell, the press was getting antsy. What if the story about the crash of the flying saucer was true? They had to find the rancher, get his name from the sheriff, and grab him for the exclusive of the century. Radio station KGFL conspired behind military backs to undercut their authority. Freedom of the press would not be stifled. It would take the better part of the day to find the target of their abduction plans. Brazel would spend the night at the radio station and on a wire recorder to talk about little men. Not far from there, the returning intelligence officer roused his wife and 11-year-old son to share with them an experience none would ever forget. I-beams with strange symbology, and talk about material not manufactured on this earth. Washington remained watchful late into the evening, but night still fell the fourth day. The very next morning, while Brazel sipped a cup of coffee in the kitchen of the majority owner of radio station KGFL, the RAAF base commander assembled his senior officers for an extra early staff meeting to assess the escalating situation. But before his two intelligence officers would even make their report of the debris field 65 miles northwest of town, there had been a new development just 40 miles to the north. The remains of a small ship and additional bodies. And if that wasn't disconcerting enough, the sheriff, fire department, press, and other civilians were already at that scene. The situation could have gotten completely out of hand, but the colonel was relieved to report that the entire area had been cordoned off, roads blocked, and witnesses warned not to talk. Subterfuge is a military specialty, and Washington already had Roswell material in hand for 2 days. No knee-jerk reaction here. They had to admit something, but cooler heads chose the old scarecrow technique. First build it up, then tear it down. The press release was all but carefully written.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?